while some online bullion dealers continue to charge almost $2 over spot for 1 ounce silver rounds, SD Bullion is selling 1 ounce silver rounds at only 49 cents over spot on any quantity. Again, that's $9.99 fine silver for just 49 cents over spot for any quantity. If you haven't joined the over 40,000 precious metals investors by making the switch to SD Bullion, what are you waiting for? You could save hundreds or even thousands of dollars on your next order. SD Bullion, the lowest prices, period.
We have no idea how much risk is in the system, and we're continuing to play some sort of a musical chairs game where we just hope that when the music stops, we have a chair. There are people who are assuming there is no chairs. We're all going to be fighting for one single chair, and there's too many people involved.
Hey friends, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us. Sean here from SGT Report, and I have returning guest David McAlvany, the CEO of McAlvany Financial Group, on the line. And guys, do me a favor, will you? If you haven't already subscribed, please go to weeklycommentary.com and sign up for the McAlvany Weekly Commentary. It is an excellent podcast with David himself, and we're tracking how many SGT Report viewers sign up through weeklycommentary.com. So if you'll do that, it'll be a win for us and a win for you, because you're not going to find better information anywhere else. Well, maybe with the exception of SGT Report. David, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for those kind words.
Oh, well, I appreciate you coming back on. I really do. And I just wanted to ask you something. I want your opinion on this. I sincerely do. How insane is the left, the DNC, at this point? Let me read you this. Democratic Election Commissioner demands probe of Russian links to Facebook, Drudge, HuffPo. Faith in democracy shaken, they say. The left is doubling down, regardless of the fact that all roads in the assassination of Seth Rich appear to point to the DNC, according to Kim.com and others. Perhaps even Julian Assange has made those types of inferences. These people are just going to double down on insanity here, David. And my question is, why?
Well, I think they need to be careful what they wish for, because if they dig very deep, what they're going to find is past and present. There are some deep ties to Russia, which center in the DNC, the Obama administration, the Clinton administration. I mean, you don't want to dig too deep, lest you start getting at the actual truth. No, this is a convenient way of continuing to make a big to-do about Trump. Try to illegitimize the regime, et cetera, et cetera. It seems like there's been enough evidence brought out so far to say there's really no smoke, no fire. And yet you're right. The insanity of it is they continue to pound the drum. To me, it is also an indication that they've run out of clear ways to discredit him. And so they're coming back to something that stirs fear in people. You know, did we have a legitimate election? Should we have an election committee? As if we do this in lots of countries where we will basically oversee an election and tell you if it was free and fair. They're suggesting that this was not free, this was not fair. Of course, I think the left tends to think that it's not fair anytime they lose. But that's been the case for a long time.
Well, and I want to ask you this as well, because I'm not under any illusion that the right, the GOP, is any more squeaky clean than the left and the DNC. Now, we know the left is extremely corrupt, but I saw what the GOP did to Ron Paul back in 2012. It's the same exact dirty tricks that the DNC played on Bernie Sanders. So this is all in the wide open now, and I think everybody's waking up. So my question for you is this. When the left introduces this, a new Democratic bill to establish a National Russian Threat Response Center, Zero Hedge writes, thrusting America deeper into Russia-phobia. I don't think most Americans fear Russia. I think most Americans are starting to realize that Putin is a pretty lucid character who seems to speak, well, sincerely at least, when he speaks at all. And this isn't working. Is this the deep state? Do you think the deep state is exemplified by the DNC at this point? Because the deep state is no longer deep. It's very shallow. We can all see it.
It's where our concerns should be. That the folks who've been running the scene for a long time frankly don't matter. It doesn't matter to them if they're wearing a red shirt or a blue shirt, and they can co-opt and maneuver just about any organization. The challenge that Trump represents is he's an independent thinker. Frankly, to some degree, Obama represented a challenge to the deep state too, because he was more idealistic than they anticipated. I think the deep state was very interested in him on the front end, but as he governed, they realized that his idealism wasn't exactly in tune with what they had in mind. So now two people back to back, Trump even more so, fiercely independent and willing to question the legitimacy of the deep state and the mainstream media. And the attacks will continue to be relentless to disorganize him, to undo him, to bring something, anything into the limelight that might have him impeached. I think the deep state is desperate because for the first time in a long time, they actually feel that there's a threat to their existence. The challenge for us is that when a group as powerful as those we're referring to as the deep state are challenged and they experience existential threat, you have no idea what can happen next. You have zero idea of what can happen next. This is not a gentleman's club. This is not a group that behaves with real diplomacy. If they have to, they'll take the gloves off. If they have to, it's brass knuckles and a straight razor. So, what happens next will be very interesting to see. Frankly, I would not want to be Donald Trump from a safety standpoint, because I think the deep state has great apprehensions about their own undoing.
That's very interesting, and I worry about the same thing, because I think that the enemies of the American people, which include the media, the mainstream Mockingbird media at this point, I can share this other bit of information with you and get your thoughts on it. The media and the deep state is clearly aligned against the people, and I know a lot of people think Donald Trump is nothing but a puppet, but it seems to me that these same liars, really, in the DNC, and I'll include the GOP with people like McCain and Lindsey Graham, throw them right in that same briar patch with Pelosi and the rest of them, and Clinton and Podesta. Those are the people aligned against Trump, and you're right. I think he's at risk, but where do we go with that? How do we protect this man from the deep state?
I think if anyone's interested in sort of the angst that the deep state is feeling, read Foreign Affairs magazine sometime. Read The Economist from the other side of the pond, just to see how phobic they are of Trump. Every month or every quarter that the Foreign Affairs magazine comes out, it's fascinating to see just how uncomfortable they are. I mean, really, it's interesting to see that level of fear expressed by the establishment. And so, is Donald Trump a puppet? I look at Foreign Affairs as a great litmus test for how the establishment feels about anything and everything, whether it's moving towards a cashless society, which they're total proponents of in Foreign Affairs, or just who their current favorite boy is, and Trump is not their boy. Trump is not their boy by any stretch. And again, from the guys who are the editors to the guests who are writing in Foreign Affairs, you get the sense that they feel that the world is coming to an end. They're in panic mode, and they're speaking. These are highly academic people who generally don't speak with hyperbole, and they're going nuts. You read it and they're like, it would never pass for academic language, the stuff that's being written in Foreign Affairs today. Again, I just think that's a good suggestion of who is Donald Trump. If we learn anything from your enemy's enemy is your friend, Donald Trump may be our friend, and you're getting an indication of just how much they feel he is an enemy there in Foreign Affairs magazine.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing, and I think it's important to discuss this because, magazines like The Economist, which is Rothschild controlled to some degree at least, and remember that 1988 cover predicted an end to fiat currencies and pretty much a global currency, maybe a gold-based currency in 2018, which is right around the corner. But I feel like Foreign Affairs, The Economist, Washington Post, New York Times, they don't actually share news, they share narratives, which seem to be deep state narratives. So they try to tell a story, and it's almost like they're forcing brainwashing on the people to accept those narratives. And so when you say that the deep state is in a panic, these people are in a panic, I've heard others I respect say that too. People like Joseph P. Farrell, Catherine Austin Fitts. Are they truly in a panic because people are waking up to what they represent, which is the antithesis of what America is supposed to be?
I think a part of the success of the establishment is keeping people so happy with the status quo, whether that's overconsumption, use of credit cards, what have you, and in just a sense of normalcy that you never get involved in politics, you never get involved in public policy, and you don't care about what happens in international relations or things of that nature.
Stay dumbed down.
Yeah, just stay dumbed down and let the experts take care of it. When people start asking questions and questioning the legitimacy of the experts, that stands as a real challenge, because it is an appeal to authority which has allowed for the establishment to maintain the positions that they have for so long. So it's a very big deal when people start saying, who cares if you have a PhD? Who cares if you've had 15 years in this particular administrative post? We think what you've done for the last 15 years is a joke. And if this is what you do, and if this is your claim to legitimacy, simply authority, to heck with it. So I think it does represent a real existential threat when people start to think for themselves and start to ask questions that, again, get to the legitimacy of that appeal to authority.
Yeah, I love that word, legitimacy. And you said the legitimacy of the experts. Stand down and just let's defer to the legitimacy of the experts, which brings me kind of full circle to this Rothschild Economist magazine and the 2018 prediction of what appears to be the demise of the dollar. I don't know that they're on track for that at this point with the rise of the cryptos, unless the cryptos is some sort of deep state operation to brainwash us all into accepting digital currencies. But when we talk about legitimacy, let's talk about the legitimacy of the dollar. Is it still legitimate? Does it have legs to stand on? Well, the West and the partners of the West, like the UK, of course, the British Royals, the Saudis, will they be able to prop up this dollar petro standard for much longer?
Well, I think a lot of these players have been very significant in propping it up to this point. The fact that we are changing the geopolitical landscape as we speak, I think we're doing things that undermine the legitimacy of the dollar and the various props that have been there for years. Through our foreign policy. And if any of your listeners are interested, they can request a newsletter that we've put out on a number of geopolitical issues. And I'd encourage you to listen to the most recent weekly commentary, where we deal with some things that, specifically siphoning off of wealth from the United States to the rest of the world. And it's I think that's changing landscape of international relations, which is ultimately going to contribute to the demise of the dollar. Gold features prominently in this because gold is kind of a litmus test for dollar legitimacy. And when you see an increase in the price of gold, really what you're seeing is a group of skeptics clustering together and buying something that is a non-dollar asset, something that is outside of the dollar system, something that is outside of the U.S. financial system and outside of the derivatives daisy chain that exists within that financial system. So when it comes to concerns about the viability of the dollar, when it comes to really votes of confidence for the Fed, our central bank, the gold price really is that litmus test for who is moving and in what quantities away from a confidence or no confidence vote, as it were, for the Fed and dollar stability. So does it make sense that gold periodically is attacked? Yes, because it's like a barometer. It's like a barometer. If your intention is to destroy the idea that a storm is coming, one of the best ways of doing that is taking a ball-peen hammer to a barometer. That way you have no indication of what is impending. And gold is that. It's the front edge of crisis and storm warning. And to the degree that you can silence the messaging that comes from the gold market, you win by default. So this battle of demise of the dollar, dollar legitimacy, the price of gold, what is periodically done to hammer it in price, there is a dialogue here, and it has everything to do with top-down monetary management and its legitimacy. Or as you and I might argue, it being delegitimized as we speak.
Yeah, and that is what's so interesting about the precious metals price suppression schemes, which we now know are absolutely quantifiable. They're admitted to by Deutsche Bank, HSBC. There's lawsuits against these big criminal banks for fixing the price of gold and silver. And so when we talk about gold and silver being barometers for the health of the world economy and specifically the health of the dollar, that barometer is broken, but it's been purposely smashed on the ground by these criminal banks. So if we want to see if there's hyperinflation in the system, we can't look to gold or silver. We have to look to bonds, to the stock market. Look at the price of Amazon. My God, look at the cryptocurrencies. These other assets are very clearly telling us the dollar is in the process of hyperinflating.
Yeah, there is a growing crowd that says we just want out, and the fact that cryptocurrencies are appealing in many respects. I mean, there's some real value in the cryptocurrencies. As a store of value, I have not been convinced yet, simply because of the erratic behavior. Seeing volatility on the upside implies that there's not a lot of liquidity on the other side of the trade. So if you ever did want to sell, you can see just as much volatility on the downside. To see 40, 50, 60, 70% declines in the cryptocurrencies, I think is a real possibility, which again underscores that question of, is this a store of value? Well, but more important for our conversation today is it's an indication of people voting with their feet. Okay, that is a reality. And going back to what we were talking about a moment ago, Deutsche Bank hammering the price of gold, and there being sort of a smoking gun evidence with some of these banks directly participating. It was the Deutsche Bank CEO who, at the end of this last year, was quoted as saying there is an irrational buyer by definition in the markets. Now, he's talking about the bond markets of the world. He's talking about risk as we measure it in terms of interest rates and what we regard as a risk-free rate, that is the U.S. Treasury. And when you have an irrational buyer, price becomes irrelevant, which means basically your benchmark for risk, if that's interest rates, and it does affect how people view risk across the spectrum, whether it's stocks, bonds, foreign currencies, commodities, what have you. If there's an irrational buyer in the most important markets of the world, it means that we don't have price discovery in any market. Zero price discovery in any market. We don't know what it means to have Amazon priced at 1,000. We don't know what it means to have gold priced at 12 to 1250. We don't know what it means to have the 10-year Treasury priced at X, Y, or Z. I mean, do you realize that junk bonds in Europe are at 2.6%, just a skosh above a 10-year Treasury? This is, what does that even mean? What it means is that we have no idea how much risk is in the system, and we're continuing to play some sort of a musical chairs game where we just hope that when the music stops, we have a chair. There are people who are assuming there is no chairs. We're all going to be fighting for one single chair, and there's too many people involved. So the cryptocurrencies are in vogue today, I think, partially on that basis. And I think we'll see a massive shift towards gold and silver on that same basis as, again, people realize, wait a minute, all I want is a seat. And they don't realize that they're a little bit late to the game.
That's so powerful. I mean, you just gave me a couple of sound bites there to lead this thing off with, because we are running out of chairs. And as you just said, some people believe there are no chairs left. Now, for a long time, gold and silver in physical form have been those chairs. They are lifeboats. So before I get to my final question for you about Amazon, because we have to circle back to the beast known as Amazon, which at this point is clearly part of the deep state. Jeff Bezos, the CIA cloud contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He hired Podesta as a columnist at Washington Post after buying WAPO, which a lot of people call Bezos' blog, which I think is so incredibly spot on and humorous. I want to ask you, though, are we suckers for continuing to buy physical silver at 16 or 17, or are we just damn smart and spot on?
I think you're damn smart and spot on. I think where we are suckers is we continue to look for the best deals, and sometimes the best deals we do find on Amazon. And the problem is what we're doing is we're gutting small businesses all across America and allowing for a monopolization of retail in a way that remakes our economy. And I frankly would like to see the mom and pop bookstore, the mom and pop whatever store down on Main Street here in Durango succeed. What we're seeing is stores hollowed out. We're seeing retail. If you're a real estate investor or owner in retail space, you've got trials ahead of you. Why? Because actually the average guy and gal does want the best deal possible. They're being smart with their money, and whether it is buying silver or having Amazon Prime and getting everything delivered for free, the reality is what is free to you has a high cost someplace else. And that free to you is costing a lot of jobs. It's costing a lot of businesses and small enterprises that would keep dollars circulating in a small town. The way I think of the Amazonization, tough word, of America is that you're basically lowering velocity in small town America. And what I mean by that is velocity of money is when you take $1 and you circulate it through the economy. An increase in velocity is the number of times that dollar goes through an economy. It represents greater economic activity and ultimately an increase in wealth across a broad scale. when you concentrate a dollar flow into one particular channel and away from a local economy, a state economy, and focus on a company like Amazon, guess where it's going? It's going to a small corporate nexus in one part of the country, and it's going away from what would have been dollars circulating in your own hometown. That ultimately has a very, very big effect. If you want to look at Puerto Rico, if you want to look at Detroit, if you want to look at the state of Illinois, what you have is example after example of liabilities growing and then ultimately an economic structure shifting such that there is no longer the income in that small economy to keep it going. The liabilities compared to the assets and income, there's a mismatch, and you end up with bankruptcy. We're doing that by doing business with Amazon, and we're going to laugh our way to the bank thinking that we got the best deal in town until we look at our local property values and look at all the things that might, in another sense, be very important to us and not realize that we're actually gutting ourselves. We're gutting ourselves doing business with Amazon.
Yeah, it's the very definition of penny smart, pound foolish. And
right.
You know as well as I do that Walmart, over the course of several decades, gutted small town Main Street. And now Amazon is in here cleaning up the rest of the crumbs. And you're right, we're going to end up penniless in the nation our forefathers conquered, as predicted by, I think, Thomas Jefferson and the other founders who said, if we let banks run us, if we let banks rule us and rule our monetary system, we will end up penniless. So let me ask you this about Amazon. How dangerous is Amazon? I sort of referred to it and tied it to the deep state because of Bezos, his power, his relationship to the CIA, the cloud computing that Amazon has, that contract with the CIA. And now Amazon has just bought up Whole Foods.
Yeah, it's a fascinating move. Obviously, the delivery of groceries was an idea that was popularized back in the year 2000. There were a number of startups that were going to do that, and it never worked. They haven't figured out how to do that by taking an existing brick and mortar business and trying to morph it into something that is, online deliverable, and also bringing in some technology into that company. I think you're going to see a massive amount of headcount reduction, which the folks who work at Whole Foods are not going to be too happy with. What does it ultimately represent? Again, I mean, when you're buying groceries, it's one extension of retail. You have to buy a certain number of things. Gasoline, you have to buy. Medicine, if you have to have it, you have to have it. Food, you have to have. Water, you have to have. If you end up concentrating the distribution of the things that you have to have with just one company or just one, that's very scary to me. It's very scary to me to think that ultimately today we're doing it for a better price, but tomorrow it could be on the basis of permission granted. If you don't have Amazon Prime, you can't buy.
No, that's my fear, and I just want to jump in and say, because we can see what a lack of competition because of Obamacare has done to healthcare prices.
Exactly.
So what I'm afraid of is that Amazon being really the 800-pound gorilla, I do worry about the lack of competition in Amazon being, like Walmart, the biggest boy on the block in 20 or 30 years, and then they will control price.
Probably the best news last week was that not only is Jeff Bezos coming, that wasn't the best news, but to counterbalance that, the Germans are coming. Aldi, and I forget the other name, there's one other grocery chain out of Germany, a discount grocery chain. One of them already has 1,600 stores, planning on opening 900 between now and the end of next year, and they would represent direct competition with a low price sort of Amazon provider of groceries. And, am I glad that it's German and not U.S.? I'm just glad that it's competition of some sort, and we're not moving towards a complete monopoly. So your concerns, I think, are well-founded. Ultimately, when the stuff of life that we must have is controlled, it's dangerous. I don't like the fact that government controls healthcare. I think that ultimately requires us to have benevolent leadership, and God forbid we end up with benevolent dictatorship, because when you have dictatorship of any sort and you've got the means of control and distribution for the things that you need most, oh, watch out. I mean, and this isn't me being paranoid. This is just looking at history and saying our founders were skeptical about other people, and they wanted laws in place to limit the powers of government. Laws were not put in place to govern us, but to limit the powers of government. And that speaks to a certain wisdom that comes from reflecting on history and what power absolutely does to people. 7-volume history on the history of liberty was written by. He was the head of the chair at Cambridge University, history chair at the Cambridge University. Well, let me give you his quote, and you can tell me who it is. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Again, his study, 7-volume history, his name will come to me, on the history of liberty has everything to do with the danger of power, the danger of concentration of power. And I don't care whether that's Jeff Bezos or Donald Trump. You don't want to see a concentration of power. It ultimately is not good for us. I think when you skim away from individual concerns or topics that you and I might discuss today, philosophically, that's where both of us have a lot in common.
I think, and I had to Google it, is it John Dahlberg Acton? Lord Acton?
Lord Acton, thank you.
Yeah, well, we've all heard it, and I didn't know that's who had said it either. Well, you knew it, you just forgot, and I didn't know it at all. But the other thing, the other quote I love is, and I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said, the only reason we resort to government at all is to protect our liberties, and I'm paraphrasing. And it seems the government these days does a much better job at taking our liberties away than it does preserving them and protecting them. You know, I love having you on, and I really enjoy our conversations. And so I do want to give you a chance to plug your site. If people want to get physical precious metal through you guys, how would they do that?
Well, let me mention our commentary first. It's a great educational source that runs in a parallel track with yours. Weeklycommentary.com. Thanks for mentioning at the beginning. If you want to subscribe, it's a free service. We're in our 10th year, and we do it every week. And we've spoken with some of the most important central bankers, politicians, global leaders, and occasionally we just have a conversation between the two of us, my colleague and I in-house. And if you go to weeklycommentary.com, you can sign up for that for free. And feel free to request our geopolitical newsletter, and would encourage you to listen to the latest McAlvany Weekly Commentary show. And so if people are interested in precious metals, we're in our 45th year of business. We know something about the metals. We know something about the price structure of the markets. If you want an education, deal with people who've been in this business, not 2 years, 5 years, or even 10 years, but in our 5th decade. We're second-generation family business. And there's guys here in this office and gals here in this office that will forget more about gold and silver than you could ever learn if you spent the rest of your life trying. And that's a resource that's available to you. So if you go to our websites, McAlvany.com is kind of the nexus for that. You can toggle over to our metals website and just get to know us. Get to know us. I think you'll find that in the future, relationship matters. And again, dealing with Amazon and kind of the impact of Amazon on the way we do business today, most people think that price is the only determining factor in a business transaction. And that may be in some respects, but I would challenge that, saying that not only is education very important, but ultimately relationship is important. And you have no idea the times that lie ahead and the challenges that we will face as individuals and the wisdom that we will need as individuals to the decision-making that has to happen in real time. And I'm telling you, you want wisdom from a multitude of counselors, and you want relationships with people who know what they're doing. So I think we can add value in lots of ways, and hopefully, well, thanks for letting me say something about our metals business.
No, you're welcome. My pleasure. And I would just say this about relationships, and it's very important. Relationships enrich your life. Saving a penny here, a penny there does not. So like going to your local hardware store that's owned by somebody who lives in your community, as opposed to going to Home Depot or Lowe's, that builds relationships and it can enrich your community. And so that is, I think, one very big way of giving back, and we all need to start thinking more about that before it's too late. Our guest has been David McAlvany, the CEO of McAlvany Financial Group and a friend to SGT Report. David, thank you so much.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
All right. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you value important content, information like this that you cannot get from the Mockingbird mainstream media, then do visit us at sgtreport.com for real news 24/7. Guys, thanks for listening. And a special thanks to my patrons over at patreon.com/sgtreport. You're making a huge difference for us, giving us a lifeline no matter what Google does moving forward. God bless.